Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's now gone 10 o'clock at night on the first evening of the biennial Liberal Judaism. And this has traditionally been our fireside chat. I set some people some homework, particularly some of the people joining here, to see what it was like the last time we did this. So far, out of the 4 that were there, only 2 of us have survived 2 years later, which is myself and Igor. But before I go through that, I think it's best to just let everybody have a quick 20 seconds explain who they are. I'm Leo Mindell. I have been involved in the live streaming setup of many synagogues over the last number of years, particularly since something seemed to happen in 2019-20, which we can't remember, and I don't mean Brexit. But I'm now going to pass over to ask a few of the people on this here to give a quick 2 seconds about themselves. Renee.
Okay, I'm René Pfertzel, I'm the rabbi of Kingston Liberal Synagogue, and I remember very well the first service, first COVID service with my little laptop at KLS, which was really funny in a way because I was talking to my laptop, which was really far away from me, but people joined, so it was nice.
Rabbi Leah Mühlstein. I graduated from having to watch videos of how to press the button to programming the buttons myself.
I'm Josh Edelman. I think I'm here. Well, I could be here for 2 reasons. I'll let you decide. One, because I'm her husband, and I see how much work she does at home to make things that look very simple work. But also because I did a research project during the pandemic called BRIC-19, British Ritual Innovation under COVID-19, that looked at the way religious communities changed the way they did their thing during COVID. And I'm now working on a follow-on project to see what the new normal is like across Europe, which is called Recovera, Religious Communities in the Virtual Age.
Igor.
Hello, I'm Igor Zinkov. I'm a rabbi at the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, and I graduated. I was ordained as a rabbi BCE, before COVID era, but half a year later, half a year in my first ever rabbinic post, COVID started, and I had to realize that they don't teach you at the rabbinic school how to organize live stream, but luckily my background helped me to adopt and adapt to the new era.
And lastly, David.
Hi, I'm David Paskin. I'm from the dark side, the other side of the ocean. Am I the only one on this panel?
Yep.
Oh dear Lord!
I think what's hold on.
I am here to represent all of American Judaism.
Okay. Hold on. I think you're going to have a go on.
No. I've come to the dark side, if you want to put it.
Okay.
I'm from Wisconsin originally, but I've been over here for long enough that I think I have a British taste in my mouth now.
I have just realised that I am the only native British speaker on this panel.
British speaker, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, is that the right terms? Yeah, so it is native quite, for a diversity panel, if that's the right way of saying it, we've got some diversity in that respect. Yeah. So we try. Yeah.
So I'm David, and I'm here on behalf of all of American Jews. And I have been a congregational rabbi for about 25 years. A few years back, I left that gig, and now I just do education in a local synagogue. And a couple years ago, I became the Torah tech guy, and I've been supporting synagogues, communities, Jewish institutions around the country, and in some ways around the world, helping them to think about what the future of Judaism might look like with all of these new gadgets and gizmos that we have, and really thinking more broadly about what it means to embrace technology as an ancient people.
I think you've started some really interesting points there, David. But I wanted to start, and you touched on it, Renee. I remember when lockdown happened, and it was Renee that was one of the first that I saw sitting there staring at his laptop. I'm going to say you looked a bit frightened. You sounded a bit frightened. You know, looking back then, did you how did it feel doing that when you were literally in your room streaming to where you didn't know anybody was there?
I think that was the main thing. I wasn't sure who I was talking to. So it was kind of a very strange experience to have this laptop and this kind of black hole that your camera is, and staring into this and thinking, oh my God, what am I doing here? I was really, but it was obvious to me that we wouldn't stop a moment meeting with people, even though there was a lockdown. So it was the decision was made immediately. So I remember it was a Friday evening. It was really strange, but it was, there was no other option than doing it. And it was a gradual learning, and I'm very, very in admiration to you, Leah, also the way you dealt at VR, because I'm completely incompetent with technology. So I had to rely heavily on Leo, on Craig, our chair, and Rebecca, our deputy chair. They also, they love it. You have to love it, I think. I just don't understand it. I want it to work.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, because on this panel, we talk about the different skills everybody has, and you look at Igor. Igor's got an engineering background. David has always been involved in these sort of things. Leah has a chemistry background. And you came to this with but you just jumped on it and did it from day one.
I know how to have a video conference with my laptop. I just press a button and if it doesn't work, I'm lost. I know how to do it and how to speak into. But apart from that, I have no idea. So when Zoom started, it was really strange because I love technology. Don't get it wrong, but it's not that I don't understand it. I don't want really to get into that.
I get it.
Because it takes lots of time and energy, and also it's very good to involve other people.
Yeah, and then so coming to you, Leah, you were I think a week later, maybe. I'm not sure. I think it was maybe 1 week. I'm not sure.
I think we were the same week.
Right.
But we never did the laptop thing.
We went into the synagogue.
We always stayed in the synagogue.
Yeah, and that must have been there must have been days when you were sitting in a synagogue built for 200 people with the heating turned off.
It was unbelievably
And you're
cold.
the only one in the room.
Well, it was most of the time it was two of us, because Rabbi Aaron Goldstein and I, fortunate to be two rabbis and with a lot of social distancing. So we were quite far away from each other, but the two of us were together, and we had heaters under our lecterns in the end, because it must have been so cold.
There must have been that post-dystopian feeling of like, we are in this room that was built for a certain number of people, and it just heated itself, and you just couldn't even bother turning on the heating, and you are on your own. Yeah.
So I think it's like
got cold.
It got cold, and also it was unbelievably exhausting. I think that's what I remember the most. Like the first few months, I would come home from a service Saturday morning, having done an hour and a half, and I needed to sleep for 4 hours. Because I think, like, when you're used to being a live performer, right? As rabbis, in a sense, we are live performers. You are used to being carried by a crowd. You don't carry yourself, and you don't realize how much you rely on being carried by a crowd, that you can like turn off for a second because somebody else will continue singing or continue reading. You can like just stop paying attention a little bit because there are other people who are doing it too. When it's just you on your own, or you and one other person, you are constantly on. And I mean, what Aaron and I did was, Aaron basically decided to take care of the music. So he had like service leading plus music. I was service leading plus text. So we all had like, you had to lead the service plus something that you don't always do at the same time. And it was just unbelievably exhausting. And it was a little bit like weird. We had a very large screen in front of us, because you put up a very large screen for us, but we could only see ourselves. We couldn't see the
I think at the beginning we
congregation.
had a projector reversed around. With the only thing we had was to point a projector into the room.
Yeah.
So it was like you were
But we
staring
saw
at something like
ourselves.
all you did is saw yourselves 7 foot high. So I'm just going to jump to Igor. You know what, you had a similar experience. Although I think, were you at the LJS? Were you in the room straight away, or you were at home for a long time?
I think we tried to do it from the LJS, from the synagogue, and it's too large. It's a 950 seats in, and it felt incredibly lonely, and also the technology didn't work at all. We didn't even have a good enough Wi-Fi in the synagogue. So,
That's
and
right.
we quickly realized that it's not going to work in terms of technology. So we, I think, went to do services from home, and we did it for 3 or 4 months, or maybe more, until the new technology was installed in the synagogue by Yulia.
Well, we won't go on about that.
Yeah.
So, David, yours, you know, what was the experience like? Particularly, were you in Reform or Conservative then when it started?
So I'm working right now, and back then I was working in a Reform community, but I'm not the head honcho like Rabbi Leah is. I'm just a little, you know, peon down here I just play with the kids all day. So I didn't have to really worry about leading services in the sanctuary. So I actually had two very different experiences. On the one hand, I run a school. Our school did not shut down right away. And so on the one hand, the school shut down in March, but then we came right back in the fall. So I was very quickly pivoting to create opportunities to connect with children online. And here's the crazy part. Most of these kids are under 5 years old. So it was really, really challenging to create dynamic and engaging experiences for them. For the larger community, I was just doing my best to help them Leo is the pro, but in some ways I'm the Leo of Florida, and I was trying to help them, get their technology in place so that they could.
I don't know, being anything for Florida at the moment is a good thing to be, David.
I just like how you've gone from being the representative of all of American Judaism to the Leo of Florida in about 5 minutes.
So, everybody's got different experiences. And Josh, from your perspective, you were looking at this, or you have looked at this from other religions and what they were doing.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really struck me is that the experience of leaders and the experience of congregants was really different. One of the things that that Leo was talking about here is that usually when you're in the same room, you feed off each other, and that makes it better for everybody, or easier for everybody. That's how we know how to do it. The energy goes back and forth. And my day job is teaching theater. That's what I do for a living. And that got broken by the technology. And I think the kind of real isolation that a lot of clergy felt in a lot of different faiths was of a different nature than what some congregants felt. They also had isolation, but it wasn't the same. Partially, it's because a lot of the work that people around this table and around the world did to make it look the same. I remember going into the Ark Synagogue when it was very cold, and the whole place had been done up like a TV set. There was scaffolding everywhere. There were these huge cameras. It looked like a construction site. But the one thing that looked the same was the actual bima. The one thing that looked the same was the thing you saw on camera. Of course it was, because that was the point. We don't turn the camera around and show the mess behind it. We do the work to make it look like, as much as we can, a familiar and comforting experience for people.
But that's a really interesting point, because depending upon the synagogues, some synagogues have the bimah and the ark together.
Mm-hmm.
And the old traditional way, where the bimah was in the middle of the room, when you started trying doing that, you suddenly find that for some other faiths where that separation
Mm-hmm.
is, that you haven't got a focal point.
Well, and actually, so quite a lot of folks then went home,
Yeah.
and this is just even within, say, the Church of England, it depends on the architecture of the church. And like Igor was saying, it maybe just doesn't work for technical reasons or architectural reasons in the LJS until you really up the technology. And,
Yeah.
and
Leo, can I jump in real quick?
Please,
Yeah.
please.
So halfway through the pandemic, my daughter got me a mug. I wish I had brought it. I didn't think of it. It says, "I miss social distancing." Because for some of us, it was beautiful not having to be around human beings. I mean, for some of us, even though I am always in front of other people, the physicality actually can be challenging. And one of the ways that it's challenging, I think, in synagogues in particular, is synagogues talk all the time about how welcoming and warm and intimate we are. And yet, I know more about Igor by sitting on Zoom with him right now than I ever would by davening with him in his synagogue, because of where he is, because I can see his face, right? He's not way off in the distance. There is a strange intimacy that these technologies have created for us. And one of the things that I've wondered about and hoped is, how can we take what we've gleaned and gained, this intimacy, from davening at home or learning at home or what have you, and bring that back into our sanctuaries?
Yeah, this is really some of the reasons of having this chat today. And those questions. What have we? We can go forward. What have we learned? What have we experimented? I think one of the funny things, you told this story before, and Leah's fine with it, so I'm going to tell it again. Was it the High Holy Days before or the year before that? It was one or the other. It was either the year before or the year before that.
I think the year before.
Year before. So we're 2 years back. Leah goes, "I don't want you to record my sermon, because if I make a mistake, it's there forever." And now we look at it and we go, how many things that could have or should have been recorded that we've lost, that we now are sitting there. It's almost like the first thing we should do is make sure we are recording, because we've just gone through all the stuff with Holocaust Memorial, as we do every year, and the thing that mainly has been done this year is to make sure that everything that's been said by these people who are in their 80s, etc., is recorded. Recorded, because we're going to lose it. And do you see a change in what we've done? Renee, I'm going to go to Leah and then to Renee on this.
So as I was the one who was hesitant about the recording, I think there's still something that is a big question mark. I think it's twofold for rabbis. One is that it depends a little bit also on where you are in your career, right? Because it is a very different reality whether your future employer can scroll through a gazillion of your videos to see you on the day when you've come in and dragged yourself in with the biggest migraine, haven't had enough time, your Torah reader suddenly flaked out, so you're reading Torah really, really badly and whatever, which is not necessarily something you want the next recruitment committee to see. I think that is still a very practical reality. I think the other thing for me there is that it does probably make people slightly more risk averse in terms of what they will say in sermons, right? Because we live in a time when you talk to a crowd live, you can judge reactions, you can talk with people afterwards if you've upset them or whatever. If you say something and it's recorded, you never know. Is it going to be taken out of context? Is somebody going to use a quote? And I can tell you, there's this crazy woman in the States. Sorry, David. She is in the States. She has decided I'm her complete nemesis. And she's a lawyer, and she writes these great complaints about me, about my Zionist work. She's somewhat more on the right, much more on the right. And she digs out these random things that I've said where I'm like, hang on, in which sermon did I say anything about Nida? It's like, I don't really know anything about Nida, like menstrual purity things. But, at one point I had one line in it. And this woman digs this up. Now, it really doesn't matter to me. But I think there is an element of will we speak differently if we know it's recorded in perpetuity and available for everyone to see all the time, or do we lose a little bit of that honesty potentially as well?
Renee?
I mean, there are two situations. The first one is when I was leading services from my office, from home, with people on Zoom, streaming on Facebook, Twitter, etc. And the other one when I was at KLS in the synagogue. And I think it's you said that I was the off-track rabbi, because I can't really stick to a liturgy. I really feel the moment, and I need to feel the congregation, and then I can change, the order of prayers, etc., etc.
They say at KLS they're never ever going to put liturgy on a screen because you just don't follow it. You're just everywhere.
But that's exactly the point. We're talking about worship. We're talking about prayer. So I don't want this to be recorded. It's a very intimate moment. I try to create this kind of connection with my congregants online, and I don't want to revisit that. I don't want to go back to, because it's prayer.
I think there's a point there that definitely in prayer that you've got is that is an intimate moment. Josh?
Yeah, I think the assumption that this is being recorded is interesting and maybe wrong. The question is, what is this thing that we're watching? And it is a bit like cinema. It's a bit like television, and it's a bit like absolutely nothing at all. And one of the things that I think we need to take account of is that this is not normal, right? It is not a normal thing to say that these deep, sincere moments that come out of interaction with people should be necessarily preserved for all time, or should be the most beautiful things in the world, right?
Yeah.
Cinema is, the illusion of cinema is that it just kind of happens. It's just kind of there. Anybody who's ever worked on a film set will tell you it is so far from that. It is manicured within an inch of its life. And actually, maybe we need to think of prayer, even communal prayer, as more like a kind of phone call. It just kind of happens and you enjoy it and then you go on. But the other thing I do want to say, so I think we're not sure what online prayer is, like how we should think about it yet. And that's part of why I'm doing this next project, is I want to figure out. But the accessibility thing, which I think one of you mentioned before, it is absolutely true across traditions that a lot of people started to come to worship services online who hadn't before. And it became very obvious that a lot of people, people with disabilities, people who have mobility issues, all sorts of things, had been asking for this for years. And finally, the pandemic gave it to them. So I think it's important to say that just going back and telling these people, sorry, it's no longer accessible, that's not really an option for most people. But that doesn't still solve the problem of what is this thing that we're doing.
Igor, I saw you wanted to come in on this point or similar points.
I'll try to be short. First of all, I think that any worship has an element of some kind of performance, and any worship, even not recorded online, is a little bit theatrical performance, where there is a composition, when there is some kind of a element which is detached from reality. Some people call it escapism, some people call it just this different state of being, but I think there is element anyway. But I wanted to come back to this moment of intimacy, and I was really struck by what Renee said about intimacy of the service, the way, and comparing to what David said in the beginning, that the my face is much closer, the voice is very different because I'm very close to the microphone, and I don't need to raise my voice and speak up in the same way. And very early on in the pandemic, I noticed that the style and the content of my sermons and the way I approach it changed dramatically. It stopped being I stopped working to public, to many people. I imagined one person in front of me, and it became like a conversation with every single individual rather than a conversation with the crowd. And I think this is what changed for me, and it allowed me personally to share very much more personal things than I would in the synagogue in front of many people, which is fascinating to me. And I think that many people suddenly saw human face of a rabbi on Zoom. Partly because of the background of their homes, but partly because of the style of this different medium. Well, we know the medium is the message, and that medium changed the way we approach Judaism. And I wonder what it means to us now.
David,
Leo,
just going to
can I
go
just
to you? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. So this is so rich and beautiful. So I've been thinking a lot about Shavuot and the revelation of God and Torah and Zoom, because I think they're actually quite similar, or maybe. So there's a beautiful midrash, a couple of them, Rabbi Levi. This is from Sikta Rav Kahana. And Rabbi Levi says that the Holy One, blessed be God, near Elahem, appeared to all the people ki'ikunin, like a statue that had faces everywhere. And what that meant is that no matter where you were in the world, no matter where you were in relationship to the statue, it looked as if it was looking directly at you. Now think about in Zoom, right? When I'm in a sanctuary, if the rabbi is looking over there, the rabbi is not looking at me. In Zoom, no matter where the rabbi is looking directly at me. And then the other one, hold on. This is, which midrash is it? I'm looking for it. It's, sorry, it's in the same one. Apologies. How the Holy One, blessed be God, when God was speaking to Israel, and each and every one of them thought, to me, the word speaks. This sense of, as you said, Rabbi, my sermons, my teachings are not just for one person. It's just you. I think there's something so beautiful and powerful about that. And one last thing, I want to go back to what the rabbi said.
I like this. Josh,
rabbi.
Remember, you and I are the only two rabbis not on this.
Yeah, the rabbi.
We're getting no words in.
No, about being able to be flexible and dynamic in your davening, right? Not sticking to a script. One of the things that I have been spending some time talking with synagogues about is how these new technologies should force us to think differently about staffing structures and budgets, because we're going to need trained folks not trained in technology necessarily, trained in Judaism and technology to help us facilitate these experiences. So if the rabbi tends to go off and change the order of the services, if I know the service, behind the scenes, I can very quickly jump to that slide and put it up there. I do this on the high holidays here.
Yeah.
The rabbi, they might skip something because I know the liturgy and I'm behind the scenes. I'm able to still put that up on the screen. We need to start thinking about allowing for that dynamism while still offering the tools that people need to be able to participate and engage.
I think you brought up some very interesting points there. Particularly, my feeling is that this is a journey. Everything is a journey anyway. But this isn't one of these ones where we go, we're at the end. Oh, look at that. Aren't we clever? Now we've got everything in. We're done. And I think there's a couple of things that you've talked about there in particular, David. I know that I've had discussions with various different rabbis about, we've been using the guys in the, as, volunteers to help us. But that sort of is coming to how long can you keep volunteering? How many small numbers of people who 3 years ago used to have a Friday and Saturday that they would come to shul when they wanted to come to shul, and they didn't when they didn't want to, and now suddenly haven't missed a service for a very, very long time. That's very hard, but one of the things I was going to say on it also is how some of this technology has actually improved things. And I wanted to really ask, the person I really wanted to put this to is Igor, because there's some stuff that you've done and how you had these beautiful Jerusalem stone walls that have been there forever. And now, Igor?
Yes. So the way how my synagogue sanctuary looks is there are huge, empty, clean Jerusalem stone walls, and the ark in the middle. That's it. And so there was no way we could drill Jerusalem stone and to put the TV screens or to bring the projector screens. So the idea was, and we tried and it worked quite well, is to project directly at the Jerusalem stone. And what it allows me to do, that if I put white letters on black background, for example, it just appears clearly on the Jerusalem stone with white letters, because projectors allow it to do. And
So
it looks beautiful, and it can appear, so you can do it. And since then you can turn them off and it will be still clean, and it will not affect the sanctuary view and look at all.
So does that mean, I'm going to come to Leah quickly, for all of you, does that mean going forward we're going to be saying liturgy is going to be there instead of in a book? I mean, what are we, are we going to be able to,
Good question.
Because I don't know if I like seeing screens in, I personally am not sure I like seeing big screens in synagogues. Leah?
So I think for me there is something around, it's not very attractive to have big screens and then just project the PDF of the prayer book. Like that just...
You
Not-
can give an
not
example
commenting on anything,
for those that
yeah.
aren't here. That sort of happened this evening. So
That just, right, it doesn't really enhance anyone's, let's be honest, it doesn't enhance anyone's experience. I think if we use screens smartly and for a purpose, it can be extremely powerful. So for example, one of the things that really inspired me, and I'm about to go on sabbatical, so I might have time to think about it properly, but like that really inspired me, that I saw in one of the mega churches, is how the pastors use extremely effectively the technological surfaces that they have available to them to enhance their sermons. So, for example, putting up the quote that they are talking about actually on the screen. And like, how many times does the rabbi give a sermon about a word which you just hear once, and then the rabbi goes on, and you kind of thinking, like, actually, I'd really like to be able to see this. And so So I think if we start using, and this is something about training us, upskilling us, if we start using the screens for more than just as a one-on-one replacement of a book, then I think it's something that is powerful. I think if it's just a PowerPoint slide because you decided you didn't want to print books or you forgot to tell people to bring their Siddur with them or something, I'm not that, I don't think it enhances it, but I think we can do, there's a lot of potential if we would have the time to upskill and think about it, of how we would use the technology that's available more effectively. Images are powerful, right?
I've got a couple of questions that have come in. I've got some people in the room who want to ask questions, but I wanted to turn that to Josh, because you've experienced it with other religions. So you've had an in-depth. How have they been seeing that technology, or how they, some of them, and Leah mentioned mega churches, and you know, that's a different world.
I mean, one thing I would say is that there's a big difference between, surprise, surprise, Jews are a bit bookish, right? But also, in a sense, Anglicans with the Book of Common Prayer. When every congregant has a prayer book in their hands and they are following along, the power dynamics are quite different than when the pastor is totally controlling what you're looking at all times. And you know where you're going, you know what's coming next, more or less. You can get bored and turn the page, you can choose to follow along. And I think we as Jews really like that.
I just thought you put the bookmark to the end of the service.
Well,
that
you can see, okay,
you just
we've got
have
20
to count
pages
the
left.
pages down.
That's what the ribbons are for, I think. But other traditions don't have that. So traditions where no one would expect to have a book in their hands tend to find it much easier. Things like the Buddhist tradition, where you have meditation, that kind of thing. It's never been as linguistically centered as it is for Jews, or even in Islam. It's much more often about things that you've learned that you remember. I think that's a particularly Jewish problem. It also happens to be an Anglican one, so I've seen it a lot. But I think we need to think about the technology of the book and why we love it so much.
So I mean, as I said, we'll come to some questions, but I'm just really curious, Renee, is this? I've seen it in the UK. I've seen what happens here with dealing with David and everything. I see what happens in America. How does it? What your contacts back in France? How is there? Did they adopt online as the same, or was it different?
I don't know exactly for all communities, but the communities I know, very early on, they went online as well. So, for example, the community in Geneva, the liberal community in Geneva, they went online very quickly, and they also, because there's different stages. The first stage was kind of, very, we take things as they are, and then, as Igor said, technology evolved and people invested money. So then they had this big installation in their main synagogue.
And it's the same. Was it the same in Germany, Leah, from when you spoke to your colleagues there?
I think they were slower adopters, and I think what also is, and what's interesting is Israel very much so. A lot of them abandoned it as soon as the pandemic was over. I mean, in Israel now, except for a couple of the very large ones that now have a very passive kind of one camera at the back of the sanctuary type thing, most of them abandoned it as soon as they were allowed to meet again. And I think this is like something around, and I also my home congregation in Munich, and I think that's like, either if you're in a place where you don't need to come to shul to be with Jews, like in Israel, or where you're in a place where you're already so isolated as Jews because there's so few of you that you really need that kind of physical coming together, that the technology just didn't kind of survive the lockdown. It was like something to bridge the lockdown, but then like it's not
interesting,
really something
isn't it?
that
Because
left a trace.
Igor was talking about how they've utilized the building that they're in. I know that you still stream. It's still for you. It's all and others in the room. It's a very important part of what you're doing. I've just got a point here from Alana online who said intimacy helped us establish how we prayed, to transform the point we would stand to adopting reverence and internalizing it more. I mean, it's interesting. It's like when you suddenly look at a view from an outside of what you were always doing, you suddenly go, is what we were doing what we want to continue doing? And as you've just said there, Leah, it's also quite not surprising that the minute the opportunity was to go back to the old ways, that some have gone completely back. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mark Shaw, Southgate. So one question, one observation in terms of one aspect where we've been able to use technology to enhance the service for the congregation in the sanctuary is we've managed to install a camera looking down on the bima so that we can show the congregation a very close-up view of the Torah as it's being read, as long as the rabbi uses the yad, but that's another story. And that's been, otherwise you're flicking around everywhere. And that's been very nice and everyone's appreciated that. Question is that, talking about the advantage when everyone was of Zoom and it was wonderful and we were all on Zoom, coming back where most people have continued streaming, you then develop two congregations. You develop the congregation in the sanctuary and the congregation on Zoom. And it became obvious to us, and I'd be interested in your experiences, that they were two congregations, each of which had different experiences of the service, and the ability to join those two as a hybrid and communicate between the two was very challenging.
I think that's quite, I mean, over this period of time, it's one of the most striking, obvious things that happened. Leah, as you renamed the synagogue, or your synagogue was renamed, part of this, or?
No, you're very definitely a part of this. I mean, even the choice of the name Ark, right? An ark can move and like take you through the flood or the catastrophe or the pandemic, right? So that all did feed into that. I think what you raise is absolutely right, though, that there are two communities in a sense experience the service differently. I guess I still see an opportunity in that what I think is really lovely is that what we're at least seeing at the Ark is that they are not completely separate. So while some people tend to be online because they live further away, like what's fantastic is that when they come, they are welcomed as if they've been regulars every week there, even though they were distant on the Zoom. So I think there is a way of, in some way, it is being bridged, even though it feels a little bit apart. And I think one of the things we haven't mentioned of the groups that used to be excluded is that actually stepping through the doors of a synagogue or over the threshold of a synagogue can be really intimidating and scary. And like, if you didn't grow up in the community, like David was talking about this, we all talk about how friendly and lovely and warm we are. But most synagogues, when you first step across the threshold, you don't know anyone. They feel anything but friendly and welcoming. They feel like there's this clique that know each other, and how am I going to get in? And I think what the online provided for people is people were able to be kind of silently in the background, not turning on their cameras or not even on the Zoom, just on the stream, And they had a way of gradually moving in, so that by the point when they come across the actual physical threshold, they're old friends. And so yes, there is some separation, but I think there is also an opportunity for people to reconnect, and there is enough shared experience that it still can keep us together as a community.
David, did you, in America, has it, I mean, is the question is has what happened generally been a positive experience long term? Will there be a positive growth? Do you think there are more people who have got interested in Judaism or got closer to Judaism over the period? Do you see that where you are?
Yes, and I would say that, like everywhere around the world, there was a real need for connection in those moments, and so lots of people, I think, flocked to houses of worship virtually, online, and so we saw a huge, I think, uptick in the number of people that were learning with us or praying with us, what have you. That has absolutely subsided, I think. There are still some, but the numbers are much more normalized now. I do think that maybe not in an ongoing sense, but it has allowed us to create moments that can be much more widely participated in. Thinking about even more, personal experiences, funerals, or weddings. I took part in a wedding this summer in California. I'm in Florida. And the way they set it up, they had breakout rooms for the different sort of parts of this family's life, so the groom's friends were in this breakout, and then the bride and the groom, before the celebration, went around to each room.
Is this like tables, and
Yeah,
somebody's got to work
exactly.
out which table, and there's a fight over who puts where in which table? So if you were in the
Well, I don't know if they
breakout room-
fought. I don't know if they fought over it. I just know that I showed up and they put me at a table. But I never would have attended that wedding. Never.
It is that. I mean, I do genuinely feel that there are a lot of people that I met. The number of people I met. Maybe it's just because of how I was involved in things. I suddenly met people that I just wouldn't have met or had experiences with over the period of time. You exactly.
I do see this. I mean, this is definitely something we saw across religions. This is not specifically Jewish. There was a great opening up. And this is kind of why I wanted to keep going, after the pandemic has quote unquote ended, to see what the new normal is, because it feels like a bell you can't unring. If I'm a kind of a seeker, or I'm not quite sure what my religious life is, I can, unobtrusively sit in the back online at all kinds of different religious services now. And only when I become in the safety of my home with nobody watching me, and then only when I become comfortable do I have to kind of make myself known and cross the threshold. That just wasn't possible before this.
I'm going to come to Igor on that, and then I definitely want to go back to Renee on this.
Quite early on, I articulated for myself this principle that technology should be a tool for what you want to achieve. You don't want to be a slave to technology. So you do something not because technology doesn't allow you to, but you do something because you should want to do it, because you want to achieve something. And anything to do with the equipment should serve you then, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
And that's one. And then the other part is about this slight dynamic between hybrid communities. I've been working with lots of Ukrainian communities in the last year and a half. And what I noticed, and while speaking to both Ukrainian rabbis and community and congregants, is that sometimes they felt disconnection. For example, when a rabbi was a refugee but still led services from let's say from the country, refugee country like Germany or Israel, while their community is spread over the world, some living in Spain as refugees, some in the UK, some are still in Ukraine. So that some community members stopped feeling connection, which is a fascinating point to me, because I am the last person to say that we should stop streaming, we should stop Zoom communities. I am the last person to say that. But when I heard that testimony and that experience, that there should be something in common with people who are in the same community. So during the pandemic, we all had something in common. Therefore, it was so easy to establish that relationship. So how do you create this space and shared experiences and shared joy and shared concern where you can build around it? So that's the key question for me now.
I know there's another question in the room, but I just want to really quickly before, Renee, KLS, during this period of time, the last time I spoke to Rebecca about it, she was telling me that you've had a phenomenal number of people join who've converted or are going through the process. You know, being on that, you know, you're not the middle of Jewville, you're out a little bit further out in a very nice area. How is this? Do you think this is you being online, going to different pages when you should be, etc., has brought people in?
I guess, you know, someone who joined recently said, I watch online and I really like your style. And I guess it's something they see the rabbi and they connect, they click with the rabbi. I'm very self-conscious how I appear online, and I don't like to see myself. I mean, I don't think many people like to see their picture.
But you are part of the community.
Yeah,
your community is, you are also.
So what I'm doing when I'm online like this, first I don't change. I know that I'm on a stage, but I don't change my style, and I make sure that I connect with people online. So I've got something I never thought I would have my phone with me on the beamer. It's kind of weird to look at my phone like that. But I see the names of the people. I name them. How are you? How are you doing? And then they exchange. And so I try to create this kind of connection. And it's true. I mean, my council is very, very happy. We had a large number who joined KLS the last 3 years, which is great because, as you said, KLS, Kingston is kind of, we have 0.4% Jews in the Kingston borough. So it's really not a big Jewish area, and then people coming for conversion as well, because now all my classes are online, because I found it quite difficult to bring people into the synagogue. So I teach online now. And people, very regular people coming from all over the country, really. Yes.
Thank you.
And can I just say one thing, last thing? The first service that we did online, you could see where people were coming from. And there was someone from Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. So I don't know who this person was, but yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Certain countries where we get lots of people from India. I think that's also sometimes that's then how it spreads. People then share it on their Facebook or something, and then probably the algorithms give you more. But it's it's interesting.
Question here, Jess.
Hi, Jess. I am a member of Leo Synagogue. I am daughter of tech guru Leo, and I run the youth programming in liberal Judaism. One of the sort of big topics this weekend is inclusion, and we've talked about hybrid services and how there's thoughts about staying online or not staying online. I know in a lot of synagogues there are microphones, but sometimes sitting right at the back, especially if you're deaf or hard of hearing, it can be super difficult to engage in services. I don't know, I'd love to hear about how you've seen the way that you've done services online, bringing in more people that may not have been able to access services in the past.
So I think one thing that I think has been really helpful is, while like Renee was just talking about this, like, oh, I don't like it with my phone, as a rabbi on Shabbat. But actually what it's allowed is it's allowed it to be much more comfortable to bring technology in with you. And that's a huge accessibility thing, right? Because people, for example, if they find it difficult to see, right, it's really helpful to be able to have something where you can enlarge it. And while even liberal synagogues, while we are very open and say, of course you can and whatever, right, not every congregant is necessarily as liberal as the community, and then you get the evil eye and I think that's sort of dropped a little bit, right? You no longer get the evil eye for having an iPad in the synagogue, because if the rabbi is there with the phone or the iPad or the tablet, whatever. So I think that's a really huge thing. I think the one thing that is a real challenge with the hard of hearing is subtitling. It's I'm sure we have all seen it, what the funny things that happen when you try to have automatic subtitles and you read Hebrew, or especially you have a combination of English and Hebrew. One of my favorite ones is still "Re-rise for tequila." Instead of "re-rise for tefillah," "re-rise for tequila," only topped by in one of our interfaith things, "Salam Aleikum" became "salami and bacon." So technology can be a tool, but it can also be a real great source of humor. So I think it has a lot of potential. I think a lot of us are only just starting to look at this, because inclusion is very, very complex. I remember one of my friends who's blind, but went blind quite late in life and never learned to read Braille. And she says it's like, it's the funniest thing whenever she goes to things and she's blind, she gets like handed a whole stack of things in Braille because nobody's even bothered to ask her. They want to be nice, but it doesn't help her at all. So I think it has a huge potential technology, but we have a lot to learn still as communities.
David.
So I ran I lead a monthly meeting of faith leaders who use a particular app that I use. It's not important what it is, but yesterday we met, and one of them said, "Hey, have you tried out this new live performance feature in Zoom?" So I'm not sure if you know yet, but we have all struggled singing with one another in Zoom or anywhere else, because it's always, there's latency issue. It doesn't work. So Zoom about a month ago introduced into beta a new, I think it's called live performance audio. And we tried it for the first time yesterday, and it was amazing. If anybody wants later, I have a video of us singing Amazing Grace together. It's right. I mean, we have to remember, I think, that the technology that we've come to rely upon in so many ways was born in 2020. Of course, it existed before then, but when you go from a couple 100 million to a couple billion people using your platform, that you have to give birth really to a whole new set of technologies. Not only that, but it then had to grow up full speed ahead in a matter of days, weeks, and months. And it's only now that we're able to, when it doesn't feel quite as pressured and rushed, when the technology, I think, now is able to look at captioning in different languages and allowing people to sing in real time together and all those other things that are only going to enhance the experience. Now these companies are starting to really pay attention to those things. And I just think the best is yet to come when it comes to accessibility. Zoom, I have to say, is at the absolute forefront of this. it's introduced with sign language interpretation, language interpretation, translation. The doors have swung wide open. We can truly say now that our synagogues are welcoming of everyone because of these technologies.
That's an interesting point. And, you know, it was one of my thoughts of this is what have we actually got that we didn't get just because of what happened, but what have we added on that we didn't know we needed that we've actually achieved through this happening? Josh, you've seen this in other, I'm going to come to an end here anyway soon, but you've seen this in other religions as well. Do you think some took a step forward and some didn't?
Yeah, I think David's exactly right. The technology is moving so fast, and actually, the inability to sing together was a huge felt hurt.
I think for Leah and myself, singing together is never going to work.
Well,
if we're in the same room, but
I couldn't possibly comment. But you know, choral singing is a hugely important part of a lot of traditions. But one of the things that I think, I'm thinking about what Igor said about making sure the technology serves us and that we're not servants of the technology. One of the things that I found most surprising but welcoming, because a lot of the people we interviewed were really worried of the kind of what they would call the Amazonification, is that one or two churches or synagogues would do it really, really well, and everyone would just flock to them and everyone else would essentially go out of business. That did not happen at all. And what people seemed to really like during the pandemic were errors, mistakes, strangeness, people dropping things and clicking on the wrong thing and it'll go. It was human. So actually,
nearly ended up having to fast for a week.
Well,
that's
again, I couldn't possibly comment. But I like that. So sometimes there's a thing about the technology becoming more and more powerful, but actually I think what draws people to it is the humanity behind it, and we want to not lose that.
I think that's interesting because at the end of the day, it is humanity, and what we do, or what religion is here for, in a way, is to enable people to have a touch in humanity to other people in a way that they can relate and be connected.
Yeah.
And
too slick is a problem. I mean, that's definitely something we found. Now, I'm not saying that these accessibility tools aren't wonderful, but it's something we need to think about. And I like the way Igor phrased it in terms of making sure we use it.
It's funny. I've had this discussion, particularly about the signing and the letters, with one synagogue who was like, no, we'll turn it off because it keeps getting it wrong. And you're going, yeah, but it's getting it wrong about 50% of the time. But the other 50% of the time or more is getting it right. And for the people who can't read it, if you or can't hear, if you turn it off, you've suddenly gone. They were getting 50% of the service, so why now you want them to have 0? And if you don't like it or you don't need it, hide the typing, and that's it. So it is, as you say, it's an advantage and things that are coming on. This has been an interesting chat. It's been great. We've been doing this for quite a long time, and it's the middle of the night nearly. I don't think we didn't officially say that we were going into the next day, so thank you. I'd like to thank everybody in the room that's been here. I'd like to thank everybody who's watching. I'd like to also just comment on Judith Levitt, who I know does a lot of teaching of synagogue stuff online and does her stuff, and is worth following. And this is the thing. I actually get to watch people who probably don't even know I watch them occasionally. And
that is called stalking in some countries.
It is. But I do get to, on a Friday, I do quite often flip between something and go to one, to another, to another, to another. And it just enables you to see things that you don't normally see. And it's just fascinating. So, but I'd like to just thank the panel today. I'd like to thank David, who you haven't got long. Shabbat's about to come in where you are. Well, it has come in. It has
just about. No, we have a few more minutes.
A few more minutes.
Yeah.
Igor, which we will see tomorrow here. I think we're going to see
tomorrow night or Sunday morning.
tomorrow night, Sunday morning. Josh and Leah, thank you so much for joining us, and Renee. And thank you everybody who've been in the room and online for watching.
Thank you.